In the summer of 1873, a man who owned everything stood at his window and felt nothing. Caleb Ward commanded thousands of acres, hundreds of cattle, and the fear of every man in 3 counties. But inside, he was hollow. Then she arrived. A woman with secrets darker than his own, carrying nothing but a worn bag and eyes that refused to meet his. What happened next would shatter everything he thought he knew about power, about survival, about himself. This is their story. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this tale travels. Now let's begin. The heat came down like punishment that morning. Caleb Ward stood on the porch of his ranch house, a structure of rough-hewn timber and stone that sprawled across the highest point of land for 50 miles in any direction. From where he stood, he could see his cattle dotting the brown grass like scattered coins, could trace the line of fence posts marching toward the horizon, could count the dust trails of his men working the far pastures. Everything visible belonged to him. Every animal, every blade of grass, every drop of water in the creek that wound through the valley below. He owned it all, and he felt like a dead man. The whiskey in his hand had gone warm. He'd been holding it since dawn, hadn't taken a sip. Couldn't remember pouring it, actually. That was happening more often lately, whole stretches of time passing like water through his fingers, leaving nothing behind but a vague awareness that hours had disappeared somewhere he couldn't follow. 42 years old. 15 years running this ranch. 10 years since Martha died, giving birth to a son who didn't draw a single breath. 10 years of silence so complete it had become its own kind of noise, a ringing in his ears that never stopped. He threw the whiskey into the dirt and watched it make a dark stain that would be gone in minutes under this sun. Boss? Caleb didn't turn. He recognized the voice. Tom Ridley, his foreman. Good man. Reliable. Been with him 8 years and still kept his distance, which Caleb appreciated. Most of the hands knew better than to approach unless necessary. Those who didn't learn quickly or didn't last long. What? Woman here looking for work. Caleb finally turned. Tom stood at the bottom of the porch steps, hat in his hands, squinting up against the glare. Behind him, near the gate, stood a figure Caleb could barely make out through the heat shimmer. We're not hiring. I told her that. She won't leave. Then make her leave. Tom shifted his weight, uncomfortable. She's been standing there since before sunrise, boss. No horse. Walked here, looks like. Carrying nothing but a bag. He paused. She's not asking for much. Says she can cook, clean, mend. Says she'll work for room and board. I said we're not hiring. I know what you said, but... Tom stopped, choosing his words. Something about her. Figured you should see for yourself before I send her off. Caleb stared at his foreman. In 8 years, Tom Ridley had never pushed back on a direct order. Not once. You going soft, Tom? No, sir. Then why are you still standing here? Tom met his eyes, which was another thing he rarely did. Because that woman walked through country that would kill most men. Walked it alone. And she's still standing there waiting, even though she knows the answer is probably no. That's not soft, boss. That's something else. Caleb felt a flicker of something that might have been curiosity, might have been irritation. Hard to tell the difference anymore. 5 minutes, he said. Tom nodded and headed back toward the gate. Caleb descended the porch steps slowly, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each footfall. The sun hammered down on his shoulders. Even this early, the temperature was climbing toward unbearable. Another week and the creek would start running low. Another month and they'd be hauling water from the deep wells, rationing it out to keep the cattle from dying. As he got closer, the figure by the gate resolved into a woman. Young, maybe 25, maybe 30. Hard to tell. The sun aged people fast out here, carved lines around their eyes and mouths that made them look older than they were. She wore a plain dress, faded from brown to something close to gray, with long sleeves despite the heat. Her hair was pulled back severe and tight, almost punishing. She held a canvas bag with both hands, clutching it against her stomach like it might try to escape. But it was her face that stopped him, not because she was beautiful, though she might have been once, under different circumstances. What stopped him was the absence in her eyes, that flat, distant look of someone who'd learned not to expect anything, not to hope for anything, not to feel anything that might hurt later. He knew that look, saw it in his shaving mirror every morning. "I'm Caleb Ward," he said. She didn't extend her hand, didn't smile, just stood there, holding her bag. Lydia Hale. Her voice was quiet, but steady. Not timid. There was a difference. Timid people trembled. This woman simply conserved everything, including the volume of her words. "Tom says you want work." "Yes, sir." "Doing what?" "Whatever needs doing. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend a garden. I'm strong enough for heavier work if that's what you need." Caleb crossed his arms. "Where are you coming from?" A pause. Brief, but noticeable. "East." "That's not specific." "No, sir, it isn't." He waited for her to elaborate. She didn't. Just stood there, meeting his eyes for exactly 1 second before dropping her gaze back to the ground at his feet. "You running from something?" "We're all running from something, Mr. Ward." It was the first thing she'd said that carried any weight, any personality, and it caught him off guard, the simple truth of it. "You have people? Family?" "No, sir." "References? Anyone can vouch for you?" "No, sir." "So you're asking me to hire a complete stranger with no references, no history, nothing but your word that you can do what you say you can do?" "Yes, sir." "That's a lot of trust to ask from a man you don't know." For the first time, something flickered across her face. Not quite a smile, not quite sadness, something in between. "I suppose it is," she said, "but you're the one with everything to lose. I've got nothing but this bag and the clothes I'm wearing. So really, who's taking the bigger risk here?" Caleb almost laughed. Almost. It had been so long since anything struck him as even remotely amusing that the impulse felt foreign, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. "You always this forward?" "No, sir. Just honest when I need to be." He studied her for a long moment. The sun was fully up now, turning the world into a furnace. Sweat ran down his spine. The woman didn't move, didn't wipe the moisture from her forehead, didn't shift her weight or show any sign of discomfort. She just waited. Tom was right. There was something else here, something Caleb couldn't quite name. "You'll work for room and board," he said. "No pay for the first month. After that, we'll see. You'll have the small cabin behind the main house. Used to be the cook's quarters before he moved to town. It's got a bed, a stove, nothing fancy. You'll cook 3 meals a day for me and whatever hands are close enough to come in for food. You'll keep the main house clean. Laundry once a week. Garden if you can make anything grow in this heat. If you steal from me, I'll have the sheriff on you before sunset. If you cause problems with my men, you're gone. If you can't do the work, you're gone. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "When can you start?" "Now, if you'll have me." He nodded toward Tom. "Ridley will show you the cabin. Get settled. Dinner's at 6. Don't be late." He turned and walked back toward the house without waiting for her response. Behind him, he heard Tom's voice, low and instructive, leading her away. Inside, the house was cooler, but not by much. The thick walls held off the worst of the heat, but by afternoon the place would be like an oven. Caleb poured himself another whiskey, this time drinking it. The burn felt good, felt real, a reminder that he could still feel something, even if it was just pain. What the hell was he doing, hiring a woman he knew nothing about? Tom had been right. She could be running from the law, from a husband, from debts or crimes or any number of things that would bring trouble to his doorstep. The smart thing would have been to send her on her way, give her a canteen of water, and wish her luck. But he hadn't, because when she'd looked at him with those empty eyes, he'd seen himself. And maybe, somewhere in the ruined landscape of his heart, there was still enough human left to recognize another survivor when he saw one. Gick. The cabin Tom showed her to was exactly what Caleb had promised. Nothing fancy. 1 room with a narrow bed, a potbelly stove, a table with 2 chairs, and a window that looked out toward the main house. The walls were rough wood, the floor packed dirt covered with a few threadbare rugs. But it was clean, and it was hers. Lydia set her bag on the table and sat down on the bed. The ropes beneath the thin mattress creaked under her weight. For the first time in 6 days, she let herself stop moving. Her feet were bleeding inside her boots. She could feel the wetness, the sting. She'd wrapped them as best she could 2 days ago when the blisters burst. But that had been 2 days, and at least 40 miles ago. Tomorrow she'd need to tend to them properly or risk infection. Tomorrow. The word felt strange. It implied a future. It implied staying. She looked around the cabin again, at the simple, solid walls, at the door with its iron latch, at the window with its view of the ranch house. Caleb Ward was exactly what she'd expected. Hard, distant, suspicious. A man who'd built walls so high even he couldn't see over them anymore. But he'd said yes. Despite every reason to say no, he'd said yes. That would have to be enough. Lydia stood, wincing as her feet protested, and walked to the window. From here she could see the porch where Caleb Ward had stood earlier. The space was empty now. But she'd seen the way he held himself, the way he moved, like a man carrying weight no one else could see, like a man who'd learned to function despite the pain, not because it had gone away. She understood that. Better than he knew. The sun climbed higher. Heat pressed against the cabin walls. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. A horse whinnied. Men's voices drifted on the hot wind, too far away to make out words. Lydia unpacked her bag. It didn't take long. She owned almost nothing. 2 dresses, both as worn as the one she was wearing. A comb with 3 broken teeth. A sewing kit. A small leather-bound book with nothing written inside. She'd bought it in a town she couldn't remember the name of, thinking she might write down her thoughts. But every time she opened it, the blank pages seemed to mock her. What was there to say? What was there to record that wouldn't just be an inventory of loss? She tucked the book under the mattress and changed out of her traveling dress into the slightly less worn one. Then she filled the basin from the pump outside and washed her face, her hands, her arms. The water was cold, pulled from deep underground. It felt like absolution. By the time she crossed the yard to the main house, it was nearly noon. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The house was bigger than it looked from outside, a sprawling collection of rooms that seemed to have been added over years without much planning. The main room held a large stone fireplace, a dining table that could seat 12, and several chairs arranged without pattern. Everything was coated in a fine layer of dust. The air smelled like old smoke and older loneliness. Lydia walked through to the kitchen. It was well equipped. A large cast-iron stove, ample counter space, shelves lined with pots and pans and dishes. But like the rest of the house, it carried the weight of neglect. Not filth. Caleb Ward didn't seem like a man who tolerated filth, but absence. The absence of care, of attention, of anyone who gave a damn whether things were clean or dirty, organized or chaotic. She found an apron hanging on a hook and tied it around her waist. Then she got to work. Caleb came in at 6 exactly, as promised. He stopped in the doorway of the dining room, surprise crossing his face so quickly Lydia almost missed it. The table was set. Not elaborately, she hadn't found anything fancy enough for that, but properly. Plates, utensils, glasses. A bowl of stew sat steaming in the center, flanked by fresh biscuits and a pitcher of water. "You cooked," he said. "That's what you hired me for." He sat down slowly like he wasn't sure the chair would hold him. Lydia filled his plate, then stepped back. "Aren't you eating?" "I'll eat after, in the kitchen." "Sit down." It wasn't a request. Lydia hesitated, then pulled out the chair across from him and sat. He pushed the basket of biscuits toward her. "If you're cooking, you're eating at the table. I'm not running a servant's house." She took a biscuit. They ate in silence. The stew was good, better than good actually. Caleb hadn't realized how hungry he was until the first bite. Or maybe he had been hungry for weeks, months, and just hadn't cared enough to notice. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" Lydia didn't look up from her plate. "Here and there?" "That's not an answer. It's the answer I have." He set down his spoon. "Miss Hale, I appreciate mystery as much as the next man. But if you're going to live here, work here, I need to know something about you, anything." She was quiet for so long he thought she might not respond at all. Then, still not looking at him, she said, "I learned from my mother. She worked in a hotel kitchen back east. I helped her from the time I was tall enough to reach the stove. That's where I learned. Everything else I picked up as I went." "Your mother's still back east?" "She's dead." "I'm sorry." Lydia shrugged. It was a long time ago. They finished the meal in silence. When Lydia started to clear the plates, Caleb stood. "Leave them. I'll help." "That's not—" "I said I'll help." They carried the dishes to the kitchen together. Lydia washed while Caleb dried, both of them moving in careful orbits around each other in the small space. When everything was clean and put away, Caleb hung the towel on its hook. "For breakfast at sunrise," he said. "Dinner at 6. Lunch is whenever you can manage. Most days I'm out with the cattle. If I'm not back by dark, don't wait for me." "Understood." He started toward the door, then stopped. "The cabin comfortable enough?" "More than enough." He nodded. "Good night, Miss Hale." "Good night, Mr. Ward." After he left, Lydia stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing. Her feet throbbed. Her back ached. But she was here. She had a place, at least for now. A roof, a bed, work to do. It would have to be enough. The first week passed like water finding its level. Lydia rose before dawn each morning, started the stove, brewed coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. By the time Caleb emerged from his room, always at the same time, always wearing the same expression of vague disconnection, breakfast was on the table. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, whatever she could make from the supplies in the pantry. They ate together. Not because either of them wanted conversation, but because Caleb had insisted that first night, and neither of them saw reason to change the pattern. During the day, while he was out with the cattle or meeting with Tom about fence repairs or water rights or any of the 1,000 things that kept a ranch running, Lydia worked. She cleaned the house room by room, discovering as she went the full extent of the neglect. Curtains so thick with dust they were nearly opaque. Windows that hadn't been washed in years. Floors that needed scrubbing. Rugs that needed beating. Furniture that needed polish and care. She worked methodically, without hurry. This wasn't a job that would be finished in days or even weeks. This was a long campaign against entropy, against the slow decay that came from not caring whether things fell apart. In the afternoons, she tended the garden. The previous cook had started 1 year ago, but it had gone to seed and weeds. Lydia cleared the dead growth, turned the soil, found packets of seeds in the kitchen, and planted them. She didn't know if anything would grow. It was late in the season, and the heat was brutal. But she planted anyway. Because that's what you did. You planted and hoped and waited. The hands kept their distance. She'd see them sometimes, riding in from the pastures or working near the barn. They'd nod politely, tip their hats, but never approach. Tom Ridley had probably warned them off. Or maybe they just sensed the same thing Caleb had sensed, that Lydia Hale wasn't someone who welcomed questions. By the end of the first week, the main house had begun to transform. Not completely, there was still work to do, but enough that even Caleb noticed. "You've been busy," he said one evening, looking around the dining room. Lydia set his plate down. "That's what you hired me for." "I hired you to cook and clean. You're doing that and then some." She didn't respond. What was there to say? That she needed the work, needed to stay busy, needed to fall into bed each night so exhausted she couldn't think? That thinking led to remembering, and remembering led to places she couldn't afford to go? Caleb studied her for a moment, then let it drop. He was good at that, reading when to push and when to let things be. It was a skill you developed when you spent most of your time alone. The second week brought complications. On Tuesday, one of the hands, a young man named Billy Tucker, who couldn't have been more than 19, showed up at the kitchen door around midday. Lydia was rolling out dough for pie crust when she heard the knock. "Miss Hale?" She wiped flour from her hands and opened the door. Billy stood there holding his hat, looking nervous. "Mr. Tucker." "Billy, ma'am." "Just Billy." He shifted his weight. I got thrown yesterday. Horse spooked at a snake. Landed hard on my shoulder. Can't really lift my left arm." He held up the arm in question, demonstrating its limited range of motion. "Got a shirt that needs mending. Buttons came off when I hit the ground. Was wondering if you might, if it's not too much trouble." "Give it here." Relief flooded his face. "Thank you, ma'am. I really appreciate—" "Billy?" "Ma'am?" "I'll mend your shirt. But this isn't a regular service. You need mending, you do it yourself, or you ask one of the other hands. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am. It's just, with my shoulder, I understand. This time, I'll help. Next time, figure it out." She took the shirt and closed the door before he could thank her again. But word spread, as it always did in close quarters. By Thursday, she had 3 more shirts waiting on the cabin porch, left there by hands too shy or too smart to ask directly. Lydia mended them all, because what else was she going to do with her evenings? But she made it clear through Tom Ridley that this wasn't a service she was offering. They had needles and thread in the bunkhouse. They could learn to fix their own damn clothes. The message got through. The shirts stopped appearing. Friday brought a different kind of complication. Lydia was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Caleb came in earlier than usual. She heard the front door, heard his boots in the hallway, but instead of going to his room to wash up like he usually did, he came straight to the kitchen. She looked up from the vegetables she was chopping. He was bleeding. Not badly, just a gash across his forearm, already wrapped in a bandana that was doing a poor job of containing the blood. "You should see that tended," she said. "It's fine." "It's not fine. Sit down." "Miss Hale." "Mr. Ward, sit down before you bleed all over my clean floor." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe amusement. He sat. Lydia pumped water into a basin, grabbed clean cloth from the drawer where she'd organized the kitchen linens. She unwrapped the bandana carefully. The cut was deep but clean, about 4 inches long. "What happened?" "Barbed wire. Got careless." She washed the wound, her touch efficient but gentle. Caleb watched her face as she worked, noting the concentration there, the competence. Her hands were scarred, small nicks and burns and calluses that spoke of a lifetime of hard work. "This needs stitching," she said. "I'll heal." "It'll heal better with stitches." She looked up, met his eyes. "I can do it if you'll let me." "You know how to stitch a wound?" "I know how to stitch fabric. Can't be that different." He almost smiled. Almost. "It's quite a bit different, actually." "Then ride to town and find a doctor. Or sit still and let me do what I can." He sat still. Lydia threaded a needle, held it over a flame to sterilize it. She'd stitched wounds before, not many, but enough. Her hands were steady as she made the first pass. Caleb didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just watched her work with that same distant expression he wore most of the time. "You're good at this," he said after the third stitch. "I'm adequate." "Where'd you learn?" "Here and there." That's still not an answer. She finished the final stitch, tied it off, cut the thread. "I had a friend once. She worked at a hospital, cleaning and doing whatever they needed. Sometimes she'd help with stitching when the nurses were overwhelmed. She taught me the basics." Lydia wrapped his arm in clean cloth, tied it securely. "Keep it dry for a few days. Change the bandage daily. If it starts to smell or you get a fever, find a real doctor." "Thank you." She started to turn away, but Caleb caught her wrist. Not hard, just enough to stop her. "Who are you running from, Lydia?" The use of her first name startled her more than the question. He'd been calling her Miss Hale for 2 weeks. The shift felt significant. She pulled her wrist free gently. "I'm not running anymore, Mr. Ward. I'm here." "That's not what I asked." "It's the only answer I'm going to give." They stood there in the kitchen, the evening light coming through the window, turning everything amber and gold. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of dust and cattle and the approaching night. Finally, Caleb nodded. "Fair enough." He left her there and went to wash up for dinner. That night, Lydia lay awake in her cabin, staring at the ceiling. Her feet had healed, mostly. The blisters were gone, replaced by new calluses that would serve her better. The ache in her back had faded. Her body was adjusting to the work, growing stronger. But the other pain, the one she couldn't name, couldn't locate, couldn't heal, that remained. She thought about Caleb's question. Who are you running from? The answer was everyone. Everything. A husband who'd used his fists more than his words. A town that had looked the other way. A law that didn't protect women who fought back, only punished them when they finally did. She'd killed him, not on purpose, but did that matter? He'd come home drunk, same as 100 times before. Started in on her, same as always. But this time, when he'd shoved her against the stove, she'd grabbed the pan. Hot grease and iron. One swing, one moment of pure animal survival. He'd gone down hard, didn't get back up. She'd run that same night, taken nothing but what she could carry. That was 8 months ago. 8 months of moving, hiding, working, whatever jobs she could find until someone started asking questions or looking at her too closely, or she just felt the walls closing in. 8 months of running. Until she'd seen the sign for Ward Ranch 20 miles back. Until she'd walked through country that should have killed her. Until she'd stood at that gate and decided, here, This is where I stop. Lydia rolled onto her side, pulled the thin blanket up to her chin. Through the window, she could see the main house, could see a light burning in what she'd learned was Caleb's room. He was awake too. Both of them lying in the darkness, carrying weight no one else could see. Tomorrow she'd wake up and make coffee and cook breakfast and continue the work of living. Tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. Until the past caught up with her or until she finally believed she might deserve a future. Whichever came first. The third week brought rain. Not much, just enough to settle the dust and turn the world briefly green. Lydia stood on the porch of her cabin and watched it fall, breathing in the smell of wet earth. Around her, the ranch came alive with new sound, water dripping from the roof, cattle moving toward the creek, men calling to each other with something close to joy. The garden responded overnight, tiny green shoots pushing through the soil. It was almost enough to make her believe in something. Not miracles. She'd stopped believing in those a long time ago. But maybe in the simple persistence of life. Plant a seed, give it water, and sometimes it grows. Sometimes that's all you can ask for. Caleb found her there on the third day of rain, standing in the garden with mud on her boots and her hair coming loose from its pins. "It's growing," he said. "Some of it. More than I expected this late in the season." She knelt and pulled a weed that was trying to choke out a tomato plant. "Things grow when you give them what they need." He was quiet for a moment, then, "Is that what you're doing here, Lydia? Growing?" She looked up at him. His face was different in the rain, softer somehow, less hard. Or maybe she was just starting to see past the walls. "I'm trying," she said. "Same as these plants, same as anyone." He nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here." It was the first personal thing he'd said to her, the first acknowledgement that she was more than hired help, more than just another set of hands. "Thank you," she said quietly. That night, Caleb came in from checking the fences soaked through. Lydia had hot coffee waiting, and towels, and a fire in the hearth even though it wasn't that cold. He stood dripping in the doorway, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he smiled. Actually smiled. "You're going to ruin my floors with all that water," she said. "Your floors?" "I cleaned them. That makes them mine." He laughed. It was a rusty sound, like something that hadn't been used in years, and wasn't sure it still worked. But it was genuine. "My apologies, Miss Hale. I'll be more careful with your floors." He went to change, and Lydia stood in the kitchen, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. It took her a moment to recognize the feeling. Hope. She'd almost forgotten what it felt like. But by the end of the third week, a routine had established itself. Not just the daily patterns of meals and work, but something deeper. An understanding. Caleb stopped asking questions about her past. Lydia stopped flinching every time a rider approached. They existed in the present together, two people who'd learned that sometimes survival meant not looking back. But survival wasn't the same as living. And both of them were starting to realize that. One evening, after dinner, Caleb didn't retreat to his room like usual. Instead, he sat in one of the chairs by the hearth and pulled out a book. Lydia was washing dishes. She could see him through the doorway, see the way the firelight caught his features. He looked tired, bone-tired, the kind of tired that came from years of carrying weight alone. She finished the dishes, dried her hands, and almost went back to her cabin. Almost. But something made her stop in the doorway. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Ward?" He looked up. "Caleb. You can call me Caleb." "Can I ask you something, Caleb?" "You can ask. Can't promise I'll answer." "Fair enough." She leaned against the doorframe. "Why'd you hire me? Really? Tom said you weren't looking for help. You could have sent me away." He closed the book, keeping one finger between the pages to mark his place. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Or maybe I do, and I don't want to admit it." "What would you be admitting? That I was lonely? That this house was starting to feel like a tomb? That when I looked at you standing by that gate, I saw someone who understood what it meant to keep going even when there's no good reason to?" He paused. "Is that answer enough?" Lydia felt something shift in her chest. "Yes," she said quietly. "That's enough." She turned to go, but this time it was Caleb who stopped her. "Lydia." She looked back. "Why'd you stay? You could have moved on, found work somewhere else." Somewhere with more people, more life. Why here? She thought about lying, thought about giving him the easy answer, but he'd given her the truth, so she owed him the same. Because I was tired of running, she said. And because when you looked at me that first day, you didn't see a victim or a charity case or someone to be pitied. You just saw someone who was tired, same as you. And that was the first time in a long time anyone had seen me at all. They stood there, on opposite sides of the room, the fire crackling between them. Two people who'd been alone so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Good night, Lydia. Good night, Caleb. She went back to her cabin. But this time, when she lay down to sleep, the darkness didn't feel quite so heavy. Outside, the rain continued to fall. And in the garden, things grew. The rain stopped after 5 days, leaving behind a world temporarily fooled into thinking it might survive the summer. Lydia worked the garden in the early mornings now, before the heat became unbearable. The tomato plants had tripled in size, their leaves dark green and healthy. Squash vines crawled across the ground. Even the beans she'd planted on a whim were climbing the stakes she'd driven into the soil. She was checking the irrigation channels she'd dug when she heard the horse approaching. Her hand stilled on the shovel. Old instincts kicked in, the same ones that had kept her alive for 8 months on the run. She looked up slowly, cataloging exits, calculating distances. But it was just Tom Ridley riding in from the north pasture. He dismounted near the garden fence, taking off his hat to wipe the sweat from his forehead. "Morning, Miss Hale." "Mr. Ridley." "Tom, please." Mr. Ridley was my father, and he was an ornery bastard I'd rather not be reminded of. He smiled when he said it, the kind of smile that suggested the memory had lost its sting years ago. Lydia set down the shovel. "What can I do for you, Tom?" "Actually, I came to ask if you'd do me a favor. Got a crew coming in from the southern range tomorrow. 6 men been out for 2 weeks fixing fence line. They'll be hungry, tired, probably meaner than rattlesnakes. Was hoping you might cook up something special. Boss already approved the expense for extra supplies." "How special are we talking?" "Whatever you think is right. I trust your judgment." He paused. "The men, they've been talking. About your cooking. Word is you can make boot leather taste like Sunday supper." "That's an exaggeration." "Maybe, but I've eaten your biscuits, Miss Hale. If those are what you consider ordinary, I'm real curious what you consider special." Despite herself, Lydia almost smiled. "I'll see what I can do. Appreciate it." Tom mounted his horse, then hesitated. "Can I say something that's probably none of my business?" "Has that ever stopped a man before?" He laughed. "Fair point. I'll say it anyway. The boss seems different lately. Less, I don't know, less like he's waiting for something to kill him. And I think that's got something to do with you being here." Lydia didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Tom nodded like he understood. "Anyway, thanks for doing this for the men. It matters more than you might think." After he left, Lydia stood in the garden for a long time, staring at nothing. Then she went inside to make a list of what she'd need from the general store in town. That afternoon, Caleb came in to find her at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers covered in calculations and crossed-out notes. "Planning a siege?" he asked. "Tom asked me to cook for the crew coming in tomorrow. I'm trying to figure out quantities." Caleb pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "How many men?" 6, plus you and Tom. Maybe some of the other hands will come in when they smell food. So plan for 12, expect 15. "That's what I was thinking." She pushed one of the papers toward him. "I need to go into town. There's supplies I can't make do without." He scanned the list. "This is ambitious. You want me to scale it back?" "No, I want to take you into town myself. Make sure you get everything you need." Lydia looked up sharply. "That's not necessary. I can handle it." "I'm sure you can, but some of these storekeepers are difficult and you're new. They might try to overcharge or give you inferior goods. If I'm there, they'll think twice." "I can handle difficult men." Something flickered across his face. "I don't doubt it, but let me help anyway." She wanted to refuse. The thought of spending hours in a wagon next to him, of being that close for that long, felt dangerous in ways she couldn't articulate. But the list was long, and the supplies were heavy, and she wasn't fool enough to let pride get in the way of practicality. "Tomorrow morning?" she asked. "First light. It's a 2-hour ride each way. We'll want to beat the worst of the heat." They left just after dawn, the wagon rattling over the rough road that led to town. Caleb handled the reins with easy competence. His shoulders relaxed in a way they never were around the ranch. Lydia sat beside him, watching the landscape roll past. "You ever been to Blackwell?" he asked. "No, I came from the east, remember? This is the farthest west I've been." "It's not much. General store, saloon, church, sheriff's office. Maybe 200 people if you count the outlying farms. Sounds like every other town in Texas." "Pretty much." He was quiet for a moment. "How many towns you been through, Lydia?" "Enough." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I'm giving." He smiled slightly. "You know, most people would have given up on you by now. All those non-answers, all that deflection. So why haven't you?" "Because I recognize the strategy. I've been using it myself for 10 years. The honesty caught her off guard. She turned to look at him, really look at him. In the morning light, she could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his hair at the temples. He was a good-looking man, she supposed, if you liked the weathered type. But it was more than that. There was something in the set of his jaw, the steadiness of his hands on the reins, that spoke of reliability, of strength that didn't need to prove itself. "What are you hiding from?" she asked quietly. "Same as you, the past." "That's vague. Isn't it just?" He glanced at her, and this time there was actual amusement in his eyes. Seems we're both good at giving non-answers. They rode in silence for a while. The sun climbed higher. Heat began to press down on them, though it wasn't yet unbearable. "I had a wife," Caleb said suddenly. "Martha. We met in Austin. I was young, stupid, thought I knew everything. She was beautiful and kind, and saw something in me I'm still not sure existed. We married within 6 months." Lydia waited. She could sense there was more, and that he needed to say it. "We came out here, built the ranch from nothing. Those were good years. Hard, but good. She wanted children. I did too, though I was scared of it in ways I couldn't admit." He paused. "She got pregnant after 5 years of trying. We were both so happy, terrified but happy." The silence stretched. Lydia could feel the weight of what was coming. Something went wrong during the birth. The doctor from town, he tried everything, but Martha, Caleb's voice roughened. "She died. And the baby, a son, he never even cried, never drew a single breath." "I'm sorry," Lydia said softly. "That was 10 years ago. I buried them both on the hill behind the house, under the oak tree. And I've been going through the motions ever since, just existing, not living, just persisting. Until now?" He looked at her. "Until now." The town appeared on the horizon, a cluster of buildings wavering in the heat shimmer. Caleb guided the wagon down the main street, such as it was, and stopped in front of the general store. Inside, the proprietor, a thin man with spectacles and suspicious eyes, looked up from his ledger. "Mr. Ward, wasn't expecting you today." "Need supplies, Henry. This is Miss Hale. She works at the ranch." Henry's gaze flicked to Lydia, cataloging her worn dress and work-rough hands. "Ma'am." Lydia handed him the list. He read it, his eyebrows climbing higher with each item. "This is quite a order. Can you fill it or not?" Caleb's voice was mild, but there was steel underneath. "Oh, I can fill it. Just gonna take some time to gather everything. We'll wait." While Henry bustled around the store, Lydia wandered the aisles. It had been months since she'd been in a proper general store. The abundance was almost overwhelming. Bolts of fabric, farming tools, canned goods, medicines. Things she'd taken for granted once, before her life had narrowed to what she could carry. She stopped in front of a display of ribbons. Foolish things, ribbons. Completely impractical. But there was one in deep blue, the color of twilight, and she found herself reaching for it before she could stop herself. "You should get it." She turned. Caleb had come up behind her, quiet as a cat. "It's frivolous." "So? You're allowed frivolous things." "I can't afford—" "It's not coming out of your wages. Consider it a bonus for putting up with me for a month." She wanted to argue, but the way he was looking at her, open, earnest, without a trace of pity, made her throat tight. "Thank you," she managed. By the time they loaded the wagon, it was nearly noon. The heat was brutal now, the sun directly overhead. They stopped at the small cafe near the edge of town, more a shack than a restaurant, and ate lunch under a cottonwood tree that provided minimal shade. "This food is terrible," Lydia said after the first bite of her sandwich. "Truly awful," Caleb agreed. "Makes me appreciate your cooking even more." "That's a low bar." "Maybe, but you clear it by a mile." On the ride back, Lydia found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. Maybe it was the rhythm of the wagon, or the steady presence of Caleb beside her, or just the simple fact that she'd made it through a day in town without anyone asking questions she couldn't answer. Whatever the reason, the knot of tension she'd been carrying since she arrived at the ranch began to loosen. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said as they crested a hill that gave them a view of the ranch and the valley below. "You can ask. That first day when you walked up to the gate, what made you decide to stop here? Of all the places you could have gone, why my ranch?" Lydia was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I saw smoke from your chimney the night before I arrived. It was late, almost midnight, and I was sleeping rough a few miles from here. I looked up and saw that smoke rising into the stars, and I thought, there's someone awake out there. Someone who can't sleep, same as me." She turned to look at him. "I thought maybe whoever lived there would understand what it meant to be tired. Really tired, down to the bone. So I walked toward that smoke, and I kept walking until I got to your gate." Caleb's hands tightened on the reins, then relaxed. "I was up that night, couldn't sleep. Made coffee I didn't drink, sat on the porch watching the stars. I know. I saw you there just for a minute before I found a place to rest for the night." "You watched me?" "I watched the house, trying to decide if it was safe to approach, if you seemed like the kind of man who might give a stranger a chance." "And what did you decide?" "That you looked lonely, and lonely people are either the most dangerous or the most kind. I gambled on kind." He laughed softly. "That was a hell of a gamble." "It paid off." They arrived back at the ranch to find the yard full of activity. The crew had returned early, their horses tied up outside the barn. 6 men covered in dust and dried sweat, looking exactly like what Tom had described, hungry, tired, and mean. Lydia climbed down from the wagon. "Guess I better get started. Need help unloading?" "I'll get Tom to help. You should go say hello to your men." He nodded and headed toward the barn. Lydia watched him go, noting the way the men straightened when they saw him, the respect in their greetings. Whatever else Caleb Ward was, he was a man his crew trusted. She started unloading supplies, and Tom appeared within minutes, as if summoned by thought alone. "Let me get that," he said, taking a heavy sack of flour from her arms. Together they carried everything into the kitchen. Tom paused in the doorway, looking around. "You've done something different in here. Cleaned it, organized it. It's more than that. It feels..." He searched for the word, "lived in." "Well, I live here now, so that makes sense?" Tom smiled. "Suppose it does." He tipped his hat. "I'll leave you to your cooking. Yell if you need anything heavy moved." Lydia surveyed the kitchen, the mountain of supplies, the hungry men waiting outside. Then she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By 6 o'clock, the dining room table was groaning under the weight of food. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy, green beans cooked with bacon, fresh bread, and 2 pies, apple and peach. It was more food than Lydia had cooked at once since leaving her old life behind, and as she stepped back to look at it, she felt something close to pride. The men filed in, eyes widening at the sight. They sat down without ceremony, but Lydia noticed how they removed their hats, how they waited until Caleb sat before reaching for the food. There was order here, and respect. Caleb caught her eye from across the room. "You joining us?" Every head turned toward her. "I'll eat in the kitchen." "The hell you will." This from one of the crew, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek. "Ma'am, you cooked all this. You're eating with us." "Pike's right," another man said. "Only fair." Lydia looked at Caleb. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. She sat. Dinner was loud, messy, and completely different from the quiet meals she'd shared with Caleb over the past month. The men talked over each other, told stories, laughed at jokes that weren't particularly funny. They complimented the food between every bite, asked for seconds, then thirds. "Miss Hale, this is the best meal I've had in 6 months," Pike said, loading his plate with more chicken. 6 months? Try 6 years, another man countered. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" someone asked. Before Lydia could deflect, Caleb spoke up. Some questions don't need answering, just enjoy the food. The man looked abashed. Sorry, ma'am. Didn't mean to pry. Ooh, it's fine, Lydia said. And surprisingly, it was. These men weren't asking because they wanted to catch her in a lie or uncover her secrets. They were just making conversation the way people did. After dinner, the men insisted on clearing the table themselves. Lydia tried to stop them, but Pike physically moved her aside. You cooked. We clean. That's the rule. So she stood in the doorway and watched 6 rough cowboys wash dishes with surprising care, arguing about the proper way to stack plates and whether the cast iron needed soap or just a good scrubbing. Caleb appeared beside her. They like you. They like my cooking. It's the same thing to men like that. After the crew left, heading back to the bunkhouse, the house fell quiet again. Caleb helped Lydia finish the last of the cleanup, the two of them moving around each other with the ease of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. Thank you, he said as she hung up the dish towel. For today, all of it. You paid for the supplies. That's not what I'm thanking you for. She looked at him, this man who'd given her shelter when he had no reason to, who asked questions but accepted non-answers, who saw her as a person instead of a problem. You're welcome, she said quietly. That night, lying in her cabin, Lydia thought about the blue ribbon currently tucked in her drawer, about Caleb's story of loss, about the easy way the crew had accepted her at the table. Small things, all of them, but they added up to something. She fell asleep wondering if that something might be the beginning of belonging. The next week brought the kind of heat that made men and animals alike seek shade and stillness. Work on the ranch slowed to what was absolutely necessary. The cattle clustered near the creek. The horses stood in the barn, too hot to even swish their tails at flies. Lydia adapted her routine. She rose even earlier now, getting the heavy work done before the sun climbed high. Afternoons she spent in the relative cool of the house, mending or planning meals or just sitting still and trying not to move. One particularly brutal afternoon, she was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard a crash from the front room. She grabbed the nearest thing to hand, a wooden spoon, and rushed toward the sound. Caleb was on the floor. Lydia dropped the spoon and knelt beside him. His eyes were open but unfocused, his skin pale. What happened? Stood up too fast. Got dizzy. She pressed her hand to his forehead. He was burning up. How long have you had a fever? I don't have a fever. You're on fire. How long? He tried to sit up. The room spun, and he had to grab onto her shoulder to keep from falling over again. Couple of days. It's nothing. It's not nothing. Can you stand? With her help, he made it to his feet. She half carried him to his room, she'd never been in there before, and got him onto the bed. The room was sparse, almost monastic. A bed, a dresser, a single chair. Nothing personal except a photograph on the dresser of a young woman who must have been Martha. Lydia pulled off Caleb's boots, then went to get water and cloth. When she came back, he was trying to sit up again. Stay down. I've got work. The work will wait. You're sick. It's just the heat. It's not the heat. When did you cut yourself on that barbed wire? 2 weeks ago. Why? She pulled back the sleeve of his shirt, revealing the bandage she'd told him to change daily. It was the same bandage from 2 weeks ago, filthy and crusted. Because I think it's infected. She unwrapped it carefully. The wound beneath was red and swollen, angry lines radiating outward. It smelled bad. Damn, Caleb muttered. That's an understatement. Lydia pressed around the edges, watching his face. He didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. This needs cleaning, properly. It's going to hurt. I've had worse. She doubted that, but she didn't argue. She went to the kitchen, boiled water, gathered clean cloth and what passed for medical supplies in the house. Back in his room, she sat on the edge of the bed and got to work. Cleaning an infected wound was ugly business. Caleb endured it in silence, his hands gripping the bed frame so hard his knuckles went white. By the time Lydia finished, sweat was running down his face and hers. I need to open it, she said. Let the infection drain. Do what you need to do. She heated a knife blade in the lamp flame, let it cool just enough that it wouldn't burn, and made a small incision. Caleb made a sound low in his throat but didn't move. The infection drained, thick and foul. Lydia cleaned it again, bound it with fresh bandages soaked in a poultice she'd learned to make years ago. "You're either going to get better or die," she said bluntly. "If the fever gets worse, I'm sending Tom for the doctor." "No doctor." "Then you better get better." She made him drink water, found a bottle of laudanum in the kitchen, and measured out a dose that would help with the pain and let him sleep. Within an hour, he was unconscious. Lydia pulled the chair close to the bed and sat down. She told herself she was just keeping watch, making sure the fever didn't spike. But the truth was simpler and more complicated than that. She didn't want him to be alone. The night stretched long. Lydia dozed in the chair, waking every time Caleb moved or made a sound. Twice she changed the cloth on his forehead when it got too warm. Once she had to hold him down when the fever made him restless, talking to people who weren't there. "Martha," he said at one point, his voice cracking. "Martha, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Lydia took his hand. "Shh. It's all right. You're all right." Toward dawn, the fever broke. Caleb opened his eyes, clear for the first time in hours. "Lydia?" "I'm here." He looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the chair she'd pulled close, the exhaustion on her face, the fact that she'd stayed. "You didn't have to do this. I know. Why did you?" She could have deflected, could have made it about duty or wages or simple human decency. But he'd given her honesty in the wagon, and she owed him the same. "Because the thought of you suffering alone made my chest hurt," she said quietly. "And I'm tired of people suffering alone." Something shifted in his expression. Before she could analyze it, he squeezed her hand. "Thank you. Get some sleep, real sleep this time." She tried to pull her hand away, but he held on. "Stay," he said. "Please." So she stayed, sitting in that uncomfortable chair as dawn light crept through the window, her hand in his, until he fell into genuine, healing sleep. When Tom came looking for Caleb that morning and found Lydia asleep in the chair beside his bed, he backed out quietly and told the men the boss was taking a sick day. It was the first sick day Caleb Ward had taken in 10 years, and the crew accepted it without question. Some things, they understood, were worth protecting. Caleb recovered slowly, fighting it the whole way. By the third day, he was insisting he could work. Lydia blocked the bedroom door with her body, arms crossed. "You're not going anywhere. I've got cattle to check, fences that need... Tom has it handled. He's been running this ranch for 8 years. He can manage another few days." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, frustrated and pale. "The point is I don't need to be coddled like an invalid. You had an infection that nearly killed you. You need rest. I've rested for 3 days. And you still look like death warmed over." She softened slightly. "Give it one more day, please." He looked up at her, and something in his expression shifted. "You're not going to budge on this, are you? Not even a little. You're a stubborn woman, Lydia Hale. You hired me knowing that." He almost smiled. "I suppose I did." She brought him meals in bed, which he hated. She changed his bandages twice a day, which he tolerated. And she sat with him in the evenings, reading aloud from the books she found in his study, which he pretended not to enjoy but clearly did. On the 4th day, she found him out of bed, dressed, standing at the window. "What are you doing?" "Looking at my ranch." "You should be lying down." "I've been lying down for 4 days. I'm done lying down." He turned to face her. "And before you argue, the fever's gone. The wound looks clean. I feel fine." "You feel fine because you've been resting." "Lydia." He said her name like a statement, not a question. "I appreciate what you've done, more than I can say. But I need to get back to work. Not because the ranch can't survive without me, Tom's proven it can, but because I need to feel useful again." She understood that. The need to be useful, to have purpose, to prove you still belonged in the world. So she stepped aside. "If you start feeling dizzy or the fever comes back, I'll tell you immediately." "You promise?" "I promise." He walked past her, close enough that his sleeve brushed her arm. At the doorway, he paused. "Lydia?" "Yes?" "That night, when you stayed, when I was half out of my mind with fever." He didn't look at her, kept his eyes on the hallway ahead. "I remember some of it. Not all, but some. You held my hand." She didn't know what to say to that. "I just wanted you to know." he continued quietly. That it helped. Knowing someone was there. Knowing you were there. Then he was gone, his boots echoing down the hallway, leaving her standing in the empty room with her heart doing something strange and unfamiliar in her chest. The rhythm of the ranch reasserted itself. Caleb went back to work, though Lydia noticed he took more breaks, drank more water, stopped pushing himself quite so hard. Tom shot her grateful looks when Caleb actually came in for lunch instead of working through it. But something had shifted between them. The careful distance they'd maintained for 6 weeks had collapsed during those fever-racked nights. Now they existed in a space that was closer, more dangerous. Caleb started joining her in the kitchen while she cooked, sitting at the table with paperwork or just watching her work. She should have told him to leave, that he was in the way. But she didn't. His presence had become something she looked forward to, and that terrified her. One evening, as she was rolling out dough for biscuits, he spoke without looking up from his ledger. "Tell me something true about yourself." Her hand stilled. "What?" "Something true. Doesn't have to be big, just something real." She resumed rolling, buying time. "Why?" "Because I've been thinking about how little we actually know about each other, how we've built this whole arrangement on absence, on not asking, not telling." He set down his pen. "And I'm tired of it. I want to know you, not your past if you're not ready to share that, but you, the person you are now." Lydia focused on the dough, on the familiar motion of the rolling pin. "I don't know if I can separate the two. The person I am now, she's built from everything that came before." "Then tell me about before." "It's not a good story. I'm not asking for good. I'm asking for true." She cut biscuits from the dough, placing them carefully on the baking sheet. The silence stretched. Just when Caleb thought she wouldn't answer, she spoke. "I was married once, to a man named William Hale. We met when I was 18. He was charming, attentive, everything a young girl thinks she wants." She paused, gathering strength. "The charm lasted about 6 months. After that, he showed me who he really was." Caleb's hands clenched on the table, but he stayed quiet. "It started small. Criticism, comments about my cooking, my cleaning, the way I wore my hair. Then it got worse. He'd break things when he was angry, plates, chairs, anything within reach. And then..." She took a shaky breath. "Then he started breaking me instead." "Lydia, let me finish. Please, if I stop now, I won't start again." He nodded. "I tried to leave twice. The first time, he found me at the station, dragged me home in front of everyone. The sheriff told me marriage was sacred, that I needed to be more patient with my husband. The second time, I made it all the way to my cousin's house, 2 towns over. William showed up 3 days later with flowers and apologies and promises. My cousin believed him, sent me back." She slid the biscuits into the oven, her movements mechanical. "So I stopped trying to leave. I learned to be quiet, to be invisible, to not provoke him. I survived. That's all I did for 5 years, survived." "What changed?" Lydia turned to face him. Her eyes were dry but hard. "He came home drunk one night, meaner than usual, started in on me about dinner being cold. I said something back. I don't even remember what. Just some small thing. But it was enough." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a scar that ran from elbow to wrist. "He shoved me into the stove. My arm hit the edge where I'd been cooking, hot grease everywhere. I grabbed the pan without thinking, just trying to get away from the pain." She pulled her sleeve back down. "I hit him with it, just once. He went down, hit his head on the corner of the table. There was so much blood." Caleb stood, started toward her, but she held up a hand. "I thought he was dead. I panicked, took what I could carry and ran, walked all night, got on the first train heading west. I didn't stop moving for 8 months. Every town I landed in, I'd see his face in crowds. Every knock on the door, I thought it was the law coming for me." She met Caleb's eyes. "So when you ask who I am now, the answer is, I'm a woman who might have killed her husband and who's been running ever since. That's the truth you wanted." The kitchen fell silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Caleb stood frozen, his face unreadable. Lydia waited for him to tell her to leave, to get out of his house, to take her violence and her past somewhere else. Instead, he closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. She went rigid with shock. When was the last time someone had held her? When was the last time touch meant comfort instead of pain? I'm sorry, he said quietly, his voice rough. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry no one protected you. I'm sorry you had to protect yourself. Something broke inside her. She didn't cry. She'd forgotten how, but her body shook with the force of everything she'd been holding back. Caleb just held her, one hand in her hair, the other steady on her back, letting her fall apart in the safety of his arms. When the shaking finally stopped, she pulled back. He let her go immediately, giving her space. I should check the biscuits, she said, her voice rough. Lydia, please, I need to do something normal right now. He nodded and sat back down. They didn't speak while she pulled the biscuits from the oven, while she set the table, while she served dinner. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who'd just crossed a threshold and needed time to understand what that meant. Finally, over coffee, Caleb spoke. Did you kill him? I don't know. I didn't stay to find out. Do you regret it? Hitting him? She thought about lying, thought about giving him the answer he might want to hear, but he'd asked for truth, so she gave it. No. I regret that I didn't do it sooner. I regret all the times I took his fists without fighting back. I regret believing anyone who told me it was my fault, my failing, my cross to bear. She looked at him steadily. But I don't regret fighting back when I finally did, even if it made me a murderer. It doesn't. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Defending yourself from someone who's trying to hurt you, that's not murder. That's survival. The law might not agree. Then the law is wrong. He reached across the table, palm up. An invitation, not a demand. You're not a murderer, Lydia. You're a survivor, and you're safe here. Whatever comes looking for you, law, husband, past, it goes through me first. She stared at his hand, at the calluses, the scars, the simple offer of support. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Why are you doing this? Because you stayed with me when I was sick. Because you've brought life back to this house. Because when I look at you, I see someone who understands what it means to keep going when everything inside you wants to quit. He squeezed her hand gently. And because I care about you, more than I probably should. Her heart stuttered. Caleb, you don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. They sat there, hands linked across the table, while the candles burned low and the night pressed against the windows. Two broken people who'd found each other in the wilderness and decided, against all reason, that maybe breaking together was better than being whole alone. The next morning, Lydia woke to find a letter had been slid under her cabin door. She picked it up with trembling hands. No name on the envelope, no postmark, just her handwriting on cheap paper. Inside was a single sentence. We need to talk. Tonight. The fence line at sunset. Come alone. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. She recognized the handwriting. William. Her husband was here. The day passed in a fog. Lydia went through the motions, cooking breakfast, cleaning, preparing lunch, but her mind was miles away. How had he found her? How long had he been here? What did he want? Caleb noticed something was wrong at breakfast. You all right? Fine, just tired. You sure? She forced a smile. I'm sure. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. After he left for the north pasture, Lydia stood in the kitchen and tried to think. She could run, pack her bag, slip away while everyone was working. But where would she go? She'd been running for 8 months, and William had still found her. There was nowhere far enough. She could tell Caleb, but what would she say? That her possibly dead husband was actually alive and wanted to meet? That everything she'd told him last night was true, except for the one thing that mattered most, whether she'd actually killed the man she'd been running from, or she could go to the fence line at sunset and face whatever was coming. The afternoon dragged. Lydia prepared dinner mechanically, her hands knowing the work even while her mind spun in circles. At 5:30, she left the food warming on the stove and walked out. The fence line was a 20-minute walk from the main house, far enough to be private. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting everything gold and amber. Under other circumstances, it might have been beautiful. She saw him before he saw her. William Hale, standing by the fence, hat in his hands. He looked thinner than she remembered, older. There was a scar on his temple that hadn't been there before, probably from where he'd hit the table. He turned at the sound of her footsteps. Lydia. She stopped 10 feet away, keeping distance between them. William, you look good, healthy. What do you want? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Is that any way to greet your husband? You're not my husband. Not anymore. The law says different. We're married until death or divorce, and I'm not dead, despite your best efforts. So he knew. Of course he knew. How did you find me? I'm a patient man. I followed your trail, talked to people in every town you passed through. It took time, but I got here eventually. He took a step closer. She took a step back. I just want to talk, Lydia. That's all. So talk. Come back with me. Come home. We can start over. Do things different this time. She almost laughed. You think I would ever go back to you? You're my wife. I was your victim. There's a difference. His expression hardened. You tried to kill me. I defended myself from a man who'd been beating me for 5 years. If you're too stupid to see the difference, that's your failing, not mine. Careful, Lydia. I could go to the sheriff right now. Tell him everything. You'd hang for what you did. Then why haven't you? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He looked away, jaw working. Because despite everything, I still care about you. Because I'm willing to forgive what you did if you come back. Forgive me? The words came out sharp as broken glass. You think I need your forgiveness? For defending myself? For surviving you? You're being unreasonable. No. For the first time in 6 years, I'm being perfectly reasonable. She took a step toward him, and he actually flinched. Good. You want to go to the sheriff? Go. Tell him everything. Tell him how you beat me, how you terrorized me, how you made my life hell. Tell him I fought back. Tell him I ran, and we'll see who the law believes. They'll believe me. I'm a man with property, with standing in the community. You're just... Just what? Just a woman? Just a wife? Just someone who doesn't matter? She was close enough now to see the fear in his eyes. Maybe you're right. Maybe they will believe you. But I'm not running anymore, William. I'm done running. So either go to the law or get off this ranch. But either way, we're finished. You can't talk to me like that. I just did. He lunged for her. She'd been expecting it, had been expecting it since she saw him by the fence. She sidestepped, and he stumbled past her. Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again. He turned, rage contorting his features into something ugly. You think you're safe here? You think this rancher you're working for will protect you when he finds out what you are? He knows what I am, and he's worth 10 of you. William's eyes narrowed. You're sleeping with him. That's none of your business. So you are. My wife, whoring herself to some frontier nobody? The gunshot cut through the air like thunder. Both of them froze. Lydia turned to see Caleb standing 30 feet away, rifle pointed at the sky. Tom Ridley was beside him, along with 3 other ranch hands. Caleb lowered the rifle, his face carved from stone. You need to leave. Now. William straightened, trying to recover his composure. This is between me and my wife. Your wife just told you to leave. I'm telling you the same thing, with less patience. Caleb worked the rifle's action, chambering another round. You've got until I count to 10. You can't. 1. This is legal harassment. 2. William looked at Lydia, something desperate in his eyes. Please, Lydia, just talk to me. 3. We can work this out. 4. Lydia walked past William without looking at him, heading straight for Caleb. She didn't run, didn't hurry, just walked, her head high, her shoulders back. 5. You'll regret this, William called after her. Both of you. 6. Tom Ridley stepped forward, hand on his pistol. I'd start walking if I were you, friend. 7. William finally moved, backing away, his eyes darting between the armed men. This isn't over. 8. I mean it, Lydia, this isn't... 9. William turned and ran. Caleb didn't fire on 10, just watched until William disappeared over the rise, then lowered the rifle. Lydia reached him, and her knees almost gave out. He caught her, the rifle clattering to the ground. I've got you, he said quietly. I've got you. Tom cleared his throat. Me and the boys will make sure he leaves the property. Maybe encourage him to keep going. Don't hurt him, Lydia said. Just make sure he's gone. Yes, ma'am. After the men left, Caleb led Lydia back to the house. Her cabin was closer, but he took her to the main house instead, to the sitting room. He sat her in the chair by the cold hearth and poured her whiskey. "Drink." She did, the burn steadying her. "How long were you there?" she asked. "Long enough. Tom saw you leave the house looking upset. He came to find me. We followed at a distance. You heard everything?" "Most of it." She waited for him to ask questions, to demand explanations. Instead, he knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands. "Are you all right?" The simple concern in his voice nearly undid her. "I don't know. He found me. After all this time, all those miles, he found me." "He won't bother you again." "You don't know that. You heard him. He could go to the law. Let him. I know the sheriff. Known him for 15 years, and Tom's brother is a judge in Austin. If your husband wants to make this legal, we'll make it legal." His grip tightened. "But he won't. Men like that, they're cowards. They only feel strong when they're hurting someone weaker. You stood up to him, showed him you weren't afraid. That's the last thing he expected." "I was terrified." "But you didn't show it. That's what counts." She looked at their joined hands, at the way his thumb was tracing small circles on her wrist, probably without him even realizing. "I lied to you," she said quietly. "About what?" "I said I didn't know if I killed him. But I did know. Deep down, I knew he was alive, because if he was dead, I would have felt it. I would have felt free. And I never did. That's not a lie. That's hope. It's the same thing sometimes." He stood, pulling her to her feet. "Listen to me. What happened between you and William Hale? That's your past. Painful, ugly, but past. You're here now, safe. And I meant what I said last night. Whatever comes for you goes through me first." "Why?" The question burst out of her. "Why do you care? I'm nobody. I'm a woman with a violent past and a husband who wants me back and nothing to offer you except trouble. You're not nobody." He cupped her face with one hand, his touch gentle. "You're someone who stayed up all night taking care of a stubborn fool who didn't deserve it. You're someone who brought warmth back to a house that was dying from cold. You're someone who understands loss and keeps going anyway." His thumb brushed her cheek. "And you're someone I've come to care about more than I thought possible." Lydia couldn't breathe. The way he was looking at her, like she mattered, like she was worth something, it was too much. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Do what?" "This. Whatever this is between us. I don't know how to be close to someone without fear. William, he ruined that for me. Then we learned together, because I've been alone for 10 years, and I've forgotten how to be anything else. We're both broken, Lydia. Maybe we can figure out how to be broken together." She should have pulled away, should have maintained the distance that kept her safe, but she was so tired of being afraid, of running, of denying herself even the smallest comfort. So instead, she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his chest. His arms came around her immediately, holding her close but not tight, protective but not possessive. This was what safety felt like. After all these years, she'd almost forgotten. They stood like that while the sun finished setting, while the room grew dark around them. Two people who'd survived the worst the world could throw at them, choosing each other despite every reason not to. Outside, Tom and the boys returned, their mission accomplished. William Hale had left the property and been strongly encouraged to keep riding. Tomorrow, Caleb would send a telegram to Tom's brother, start the legal process of protecting Lydia if it came to that. But tonight, in the gathering darkness, all that mattered was this moment, this choice, this fragile beginning of something neither of them had names for yet. Lydia pulled back slightly, looking up at him. "Stay," she said. Not a question, a request. "Where?" "Here. In the house. I don't want to be alone tonight." Understanding crossed his face. "I'll take the guest room." "No, I mean," she took a breath. "I mean here. With me. Just stay close. I need to know someone's near." So he built a fire while she made tea. They sat together on the sofa, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth, his steady presence. And when she finally fell asleep, exhausted from the day's emotions, Caleb covered her with a blanket and kept watch. He'd protect her. From William, from the law, from whatever came next. Not because she was weak, she'd proven she wasn't, but because she'd had to be strong alone for too long. It was time someone stood with her instead. Morning came too soon, and not soon enough. Lydia woke on the sofa with the blanket tucked around her and the fire reduced to embers. Caleb was asleep in the chair across from her, his head tilted at an angle that would leave his neck stiff for hours. He'd kept watch all night, just like he'd promised. She sat up slowly, trying not to wake him, but his eyes opened immediately, alert despite the lack of sleep. "Morning," he said, his voice rough. "You should have gone to bed. I was fine here." "Your neck says different." He rolled his shoulders, wincing. "Maybe a little." Lydia stood, folding the blanket. The events of the previous night came rushing back, William's face, his threats, the sound of Caleb's rifle. In the harsh light of morning, it all felt surreal, like something that had happened to someone else. "I should make breakfast," she said. "Lydia, I need to do something normal, Caleb, please." He nodded and let her go. In the kitchen, she moved through the familiar routine. Coffee, eggs, biscuits. Her hand shook slightly as she cracked the eggs, but the work steadied her. This was what she knew how to do. This was solid ground. Tom appeared at the back door just as the biscuits came out of the oven. "Morning, Miss Hale." "Tom." He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "Wanted to let you know. We rode out early, checked the whole property. No sign of him. Looks like he took our advice and kept riding." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you. Also sent word to my brother in Austin. He's a judge, like Caleb probably told you. If there's legal trouble coming, he'll help sort it out." Tom paused. "What that man said yesterday about you being his wife, that true?" Lydia met his eyes. "Yes, legally, anyway. But I left him 8 months ago, and I'm not going back." "Good. Man who tracked down a woman who left him. That tells me everything I need to know about his character." Tom put his hat back on. "You got any trouble from him or anyone else, you tell me. The boys and I, we take care of our own." I'm just hired help. You're part of this ranch now. That makes you one of us." After he left, Lydia stood at the window, watching the sun climb over the horizon. Part of the ranch. One of us. She'd been here less than 2 months, and somehow these rough men had decided she belonged. Caleb came in as she was setting the table. "Tom talked to you?" "Yes, he's a good man. Best foreman I've ever had." Caleb sat down, studying her. "How are you really?" "I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow." They ate in silence, both of them exhausted. When Lydia started to clear the dishes, Caleb stopped her. "Leave them. You barely slept. Go rest." "I can't. If I stop moving, I'll think too much." "Then let's not stop moving." He stood. "Come with me." "Where?" "You'll see." He led her out of the house, past the barn, up the hill behind the property. It was a steep climb in the morning heat, and by the time they reached the top, Lydia was breathing hard. At the summit stood a large oak tree, its branches spreading wide. Beneath it were 2 graves, marked with simple wooden crosses. The names had been carved by hand, Martha Ward and Baby Ward. Lydia stopped, suddenly understanding. "I come here sometimes," Caleb said quietly. "When the weight gets too heavy, I sit under this tree and talk to them. Tell them about the ranch, about the cattle, about nothing and everything." He looked at her. "It helps. Saying things out loud to people who can't answer back. No judgment, no advice, just listening." "What do you tell them?" "The truth. That I'm sorry I couldn't save them. That I miss them. That I'm trying to figure out how to live in a world that doesn't have them in it." He gestured to the shade beneath the tree. "Sit with me?" They sat with their backs against the trunk, looking out over the ranch spread below. From here you could see everything: the house, the barn, the creek winding through the valley, the cattle dotting the pastures. "It's beautiful," Lydia said. "It is. Martha loved this spot. Said when she died, she wanted to be buried here, where she could see everything she loved." His voice caught. "I didn't know I'd be putting her here so soon." Lydia reached for his hand. He took it, his grip tight. "I told her about you," he said. "Last night, after you fell asleep. I came up here and told her I'd met someone, that I didn't know what it meant yet, but that for the first time in 10 years, I felt something other than empty." "What do you think she'd say?" "I think she'd tell me not to waste time being afraid. She was practical like that. Never saw the point in suffering when you didn't have to." He turned to look at Lydia. "So I'm trying not to waste time. I'm trying to be honest about what I feel, even though it scares me. And what do you feel? That you walking up to my gate was the best thing that's happened to me in a decade. That watching you bring life back to that house has been like watching the sun come out after years of winter. That I want you to stay, not as hired help, but as... He trailed off. I don't know what to call it, but something more. Lydia's throat tightened. I don't know how to be what you need. I'm damaged, Caleb. What William did to me, it broke something inside. I don't know if it can be fixed. I'm not asking you to be fixed. I'm asking you to stay broken with me. We can figure out the rest as we go. What if I can't give you what you want? What if I can never be comfortable with intimacy, with closeness? Then we'll find a way to live with that. There's more than one way to be close to someone. He squeezed her hand. I'm not William, Lydia. I won't demand things from you, won't force anything. We move at whatever pace you can handle, even if that pace is standing still. She looked at him, this man who'd shown her nothing but patience, nothing but kindness, who'd protected her without making her feel weak, who'd offered her safety without strings attached. I want to try, she said quietly. I want to try to be brave enough for this. You're already the bravest person I know. They sat under that tree for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Caleb told her stories about building the ranch, about the early years with Martha, about dreams he'd had and dreams he'd buried. Lydia told him about her mother, about learning to cook in that hotel kitchen, about the small joys she'd found in towns along her journey west. The past was still there, heavy and undeniable, but up on that hill, in the shade of the oak tree, it felt a little less crushing. When they finally walked back down, the sun was past noon. Tom met them at the barn, looking worried. Boss, we got a problem. Caleb's expression shifted immediately. What kind of problem? Fence cut on the western boundary. Looks deliberate. And about 20 head of cattle missing. Caleb swore under his breath. When? Sometime last night or early this morning. Billy found it on his rounds. Could be rustlers, Caleb said, already moving toward the barn. Or it could be a message. Lydia's blood went cold. You think William did this? I don't know, but the timing's suspicious. He turned to Tom. Get the men together. I want every inch of that western boundary checked. And someone rides to town, alerts the sheriff. On it. Caleb looked at Lydia. Stay in the house. Keep the doors locked. I'm not hiding. I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to stay safe while I deal with this. And if it is William, if he comes back while you're gone? Caleb went into the barn, emerged a minute later with a rifle. He handed it to her. You know how to use this? My father taught me when I was 12. Good. Anyone comes near the house who isn't me or one of my men, you shoot first and ask questions later. She took the rifle, its weight familiar in her hands. Be careful. Always am. He rode out with Tom and 4 other hands, leaving Lydia standing in the yard with a loaded rifle and a growing sense of dread. Inside the house, she tried to keep busy. She cleaned what didn't need cleaning, cooked food no one would eat, paced from window to window, watching for movement. The rifle stayed within arm's reach. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. Still no word from Caleb. Lydia was in the kitchen when she heard the horse. She grabbed the rifle, moving to the window. A single rider approaching, but not from the direction Caleb had gone. Her heart hammered as she recognized the figure. William. He dismounted in front of the house, alone. Lydia moved to the front door, rifle raised. That's close enough, she called through the door. I just want to talk. We talked yesterday. You got your answer. Please, Lydia, just hear me out. I'm listening. From here. William took off his hat, and in the afternoon light, Lydia could see how much he'd changed. The man she'd left was confident, cruel, sure of his power. This man looked diminished somehow, unsure. I know what you think of me, he said, and you're right to think it. What I did to you, there's no excuse for it, no justification. So why are you here? Because I need you to know I'm sorry, really sorry. I've spent 8 months thinking about what I did, what I became, and I hate myself for it. That's not my problem. I know it's not, but I had to say it. I had to tell you that you were right to leave, right to fight back, right to run. He turned his hat in his hands. And I had to tell you that I'm not going to the law. I'm not going to cause you any more trouble. Why should I believe you? Because I've got nothing left to gain by hurting you. You've made it clear you're not coming back. Your rancher made it clear I'm not welcome here. And honestly, he looked up at her. I'm tired, Lydia. I'm tired of being angry, tired of chasing something I can't have, tired of being the man I became. Lydia kept the rifle raised. Did you cut the fence? Steal the cattle? What? No, I don't know anything about that. The timing seems convenient. I swear to you, I had nothing to do with it. I'm leaving, Lydia, tonight. I just wanted to say goodbye first. To tell you I'm sorry, and that I hope you find happiness here. You deserve it. She wanted to believe him, wanted to think people could change, could recognize their mistakes, and become better. But she'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it true. If I ever see you again, she said, I won't hesitate. You understand? I will shoot you. I understand. He mounted his horse, settling his hat back on his head. For what it's worth, he said, he's a good man, your rancher. Better than I ever was. You picked right this time. Then he rode away, disappearing into the late afternoon light. Lydia stood there long after he was gone, the rifle heavy in her hands, trying to decide if she'd just witnessed genuine remorse or an elaborate performance. She was still trying to decide when Caleb returned an hour later. He saw the rifle first, then her face. What happened? She told him everything. When she finished, Caleb was quiet for a long moment. You believe him? I don't know, maybe. Does it matter? It matters if he's still a threat. I told him if I saw him again, I'd shoot him. I think he believed me. Caleb almost smiled. I believe you too. He took the rifle from her, setting it aside. We found the cattle. They'd just wandered through the cut fence, got into a ravine about 2 miles west. Wasn't rustlers, just opportunistic cows and poor fence maintenance. Relief washed through her. So it wasn't related to William. Just bad timing and my own negligence for not checking that fence sooner. They stood in the kitchen, the crisis over, both of them exhausted. Caleb reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. You did good today. Staying calm, handling things. I was terrified. Brave and terrified usually go together. She leaned into his touch, letting herself have this small comfort. What happens now? Now we fix the fence, count the cattle, and get back to normal, or whatever passes for normal around here. And us? What about us? You said you wanted me to stay, as something more than hired help. I need to know what that means. Caleb was quiet, choosing his words carefully. It means I want to court you, properly. Take you to town, buy you dinner, treat you the way you deserve to be treated. It means I want to see if this thing between us has roots, or if it's just two lonely people finding comfort in proximity. I think it's more than that. So do I. But we should make sure. Lydia thought about all the reasons to say no. She was still legally married. She was running from a past that might catch up with her. She was damaged in ways that might never heal. But she was also tired of being afraid, tired of denying herself even the smallest chance at happiness. All right, she said, court me. But slowly. I need time. We've got nothing but time. Over the next weeks, Caleb made good on his promise. He took her to town on Saturdays, bought her lunch at the cafe that served terrible food, walked with her through the general store while she looked at things she didn't need but wanted anyway. He brought her flowers from the meadow beyond the creek, left them on the kitchen table without fanfare. He sat with her in the evenings, reading aloud while she sewed or just listened. He never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel like she owed him anything for his patience. And slowly, carefully, Lydia began to trust that this was real. The ranch hands noticed the change. They started calling her Miss Lydia instead of Miss Hale. They asked her opinion on things, included her in decisions about meals and schedules. Tom started joining them for dinner more often, his presence a comfortable third that kept things from feeling too intense. One evening, about 6 weeks after William's final visit, Lydia was in the garden when Caleb found her. She was harvesting tomatoes, her basket already half full. Need help? He asked. I've got it, but you can keep me company. He settled on the fence rail, watching her work. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. In the distance, cattle lowed. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermals. I got a letter from Tom's brother today, Caleb said. Lydia's hand stilled on a tomato. And he's filed papers on your behalf. Petition for divorce on grounds of cruelty and abandonment. It'll take time to work through the courts, but he's confident it'll go through. She set down the basket, turning to face him. Just like that? Well, not just like that. There'll be a hearing, probably in Austin. You'll have to testify about what happened. Tom's brother will represent you, and he's good, one of the best. And William? He'll be notified, given a chance to contest it, but based on what you've told me and what we witnessed, he won't have much ground to stand on. Lydia sat down on the ground, her legs suddenly weak. I could actually be free. You already are free. This just makes it legal. She looked up at him, this man who'd given her everything without asking for anything in return. Why are you doing this? Because I love you. The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. You don't have to say it back, he continued. I know you're not ready, but I needed you to know. I love you, Lydia. I love your strength, your resilience, the way you've built a life here despite everything. I love the way you hum when you cook, the way you stand up to me when I'm being stubborn, the way you've made this house feel like a home again. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know if I can say it back. Not yet. The last man who said he loved me used it as a weapon. I know. And I'll wait as long as it takes for you to believe that love doesn't have to hurt. She stood, crossed to where he sat on the fence, and kissed him. It was the first time she'd initiated contact like this, the first time she'd chosen closeness instead of just accepting it. The kiss was soft, tentative, but real. When she pulled back, Caleb's eyes were bright. What was that for? For being patient, for being kind, for giving me space to heal. She took his hand. I'm not there yet, Caleb. I'm not ready to say the words or take all the steps, but I'm trying. I'm trying to believe that I deserve this, that we deserve this. That's enough. That's more than enough. They stood in the garden as the sun finished setting, as the stars began to appear, as the world turned from day to night. Two people learning how to be whole again, one small choice at a time. The hearing was scheduled for October. Caleb accompanied Lydia to Austin, along with Tom and his brother David, the judge. The city felt overwhelming after months on the ranch. Too many people, too much noise, too much everything. William was there with his own lawyer, but he looked smaller somehow, diminished. When his eyes met Lydia's across the courtroom, there was no anger, just resignation. The hearing took 3 days. Lydia testified about the abuse, about the fear, about the night she'd fought back. Caleb testified about finding her at the ranch, about William's threats, about the man he'd seen trying to intimidate her. Tom and several of the ranch hands testified to her character, to the life she'd built. William's lawyer tried to paint her as vindictive, as a woman who'd overreacted to normal marital difficulties. But David Ward was relentless, producing medical records from the towns where Lydia had worked, showing a pattern of injuries consistent with her story. On the third day, the judge, a stern woman in her 60s, rendered her decision. Marriage is meant to be a partnership built on respect and care. What I've heard described in this courtroom is not marriage, but imprisonment. Mrs. Hale showed remarkable courage in escaping her situation, and I will not punish that courage by forcing her to remain legally bound to a man who terrorized her. Petition for divorce granted. The gavel came down. Lydia stood there, unable to process what had just happened. Free. She was actually free. Caleb's hand found hers, steady and warm. Outside the courthouse, William approached. Lydia tensed, but Caleb stayed close. Congratulations, William said quietly. I mean that. Thank you. I won't bother you again. You have my word. He looked at Caleb. Take care of her. She deserves better than what I gave her. Then he walked away, and Lydia watched him go without regret, without anger, without anything but relief. That night in the hotel in Austin, Lydia knocked on Caleb's door. He answered in his shirt sleeves, surprise on his face. Is everything all right? I love you, she said. His expression shifted, hope blooming across his features. Lydia, I love you, she repeated. I've been trying to say it for weeks, but I was afraid. Afraid it would make me vulnerable. Afraid it would give you power over me. Afraid it would end the way it did before. But I'm done being afraid. You've shown me that love doesn't have to hurt, that it can be gentle and patient and kind. So I'm saying it now before I lose my nerve. I love you, Caleb Ward. He He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was something precious. "Say it again," he whispered. "I love you." Again. "I love you." He kissed her then, and it was different from the careful kisses they'd shared before. This was deeper, more certain, built on months of patience and trust and choosing each other every day. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathless. "What happens now?" Lydia asked. "Now we go home. And we build a life together. No rushing, no pressure, just us figuring it out as we go." "That sounds perfect." They returned to the ranch to find the crew had decorated the house. Flowers everywhere, a banner reading "Welcome Home," and a feast laid out in the dining room. Tom raised a glass. "To Miss Lydia, or I suppose we should be calling you Mrs. Ward soon enough." Lydia blushed. We're not yet," Caleb said, smiling. "We're not engaged yet, but I'm working on it." "Working on what?" she asked. "Figuring out the right way to ask. You deserve something special, not just me blurting it out over breakfast." The crew laughed, and dinner became a celebration. Stories were told, jokes were made, and for the first time in her life, Lydia felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Later that night, alone with Caleb on the porch, she leaned against him and looked up at the stars. "Ask me," she said. "Ask you what?" "You know what." He pulled back, studying her face. "You sure? We don't have to rush." "We're not rushing. We're choosing. There's a difference." She took his hands. "Ask me, Caleb." He took a breath, and she could see how nervous he was, this man who faced down rustlers and drought and loss without flinching. "Lydia Hale, would you marry me? Would you stay here? Build a life with me? Be my partner in everything? I can't promise it'll be easy, but I can promise I'll spend every day trying to make you happy." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her again, and somewhere in the distance, the crew cheered. They'd obviously been listening, which should have embarrassed her, but somehow didn't. This was home. This was family. This was everything she'd stopped believing she could have. And it was hers. They were married in November, on a clear day when the sky stretched endless and blue. The ceremony was small, just Tom and the crew, David Ward, who'd come from Austin, and a few neighbors from town. The local minister performed the service under the oak tree on the hill, where Martha and her son rested in the shade. Some might have thought it strange getting married beside another woman's grave. But Lydia understood. This wasn't about erasing the past. It was about honoring it while building something new. She wore a simple dress she'd made herself, cream-colored with lace at the collar. Caleb wore his best suit, the one he'd bought for Martha's funeral and hadn't touched since. His hand shook when he slipped the ring on her finger. "I never thought I'd do this again," he whispered, so only she could hear. "Neither did I," she whispered back. "But here we are." Tom cried during the vows, which embarrassed him terribly. Pike slapped him on the back afterward and told him he was getting soft. The whole crew had pitched in for a gift, a new stove for the kitchen, the kind Lydia had mentioned wanting once in passing months ago. She cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by the simple fact that these rough men had listened, had cared, had wanted to give her something that mattered. The celebration lasted into the night. Someone produced a fiddle. Dancing happened in the yard, messy and joyful and completely uncoordinated. Lydia danced with Caleb, with Tom, with every member of the crew until her feet hurt and she couldn't stop laughing. Later, much later, when everyone had gone to the bunkhouse or ridden home, Caleb and Lydia stood alone in the house that was now truly theirs. "You all right?" he asked. "Better than all right. I'm happy." She said it like a discovery, like she'd just learned a new word. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this again, but I do. I'm happy." He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Good. That's all I want. For you to be happy here." "What about you?" "I'm happy too. For the first time in 10 years, I'm actually happy." They stood like that for a long moment, just breathing together, being together. Then Lydia pulled back slightly. "I should tell you something." "What?" "I'm scared. About tonight. About—" she gestured vaguely. "About what comes next." Understanding crossed his face. "We don't have to do anything. Marriage doesn't mean, I want to. I do. I'm just scared that when it happens, I'll remember. I'll remember William and what he did, and I'll ruin everything." Caleb cupped her face in his hands. You couldn't ruin anything if you tried. And if you do remember, if it gets too much, we stop. No questions, no hurt feelings. We go at your pace, Lydia, always. She kissed him, grateful for his patience, for his understanding. I want to try. Will you help me try? I'd be honored. He led her upstairs to the bedroom they'd share now, the one he'd slept in alone for a decade. But it looked different tonight. Lydia had spent the afternoon making it theirs. Fresh linens on the bed, curtains she'd sewn. The photograph of Martha moved to a shelf where it could be seen, but not dominate. Honoring the past while building the future. It was becoming their motto. What happened next was slow, careful, full of stops and starts and whispered reassurances. There were moments when Lydia had to close her eyes and breathe through the fear, moments when muscle memory betrayed her and she flinched without meaning to. But Caleb was patient, infinitely patient, and gradually the fear loosened its grip. This was different. This was gentle. This was a choice she was making, not something being taken from her. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Caleb's arm around her and her head on his chest, Lydia felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace, bone deep and solid. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For waiting. For understanding. For showing me that it could be different. You don't have to thank me for that. I want to anyway. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, two broken people who'd found a way to fit their pieces around each other's jagged edges. The first winter was hard. Not because of them, they settled into marriage with surprising ease, learning each other's habits and quirks, and finding they actually liked being together. But the weather turned brutal in December, bringing snow and ice and temperatures that killed cattle and froze water in the troughs. The crew worked around the clock trying to keep the herd alive. Caleb was gone for days at a time, sleeping in line shacks on the far ranges, coming home exhausted and half-frozen. Lydia kept the house running, kept hot food ready, kept the fires burning for when the men stumbled in from the cold. On Christmas Eve, a blizzard rolled in that lasted 3 days. The world disappeared behind walls of white. Caleb was somewhere on the western range with Tom and half the crew. Lydia was alone in the house with Pike and 2 younger hands who'd been close enough to make it back. The second night of the storm, Pike found her standing at the window, staring into the white darkness. He'll be fine, ma'am. Boss knows this land better than anyone. I know, I just wish he was here. He wishes that too, I'd bet. But those cattle, they need him right now. Come spring, they'll be the difference between profit and loss. I understand that. Doesn't make it easier. Pike was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something? About the boss? All right. When his wife died, he went to a dark place, real dark. There were nights we worried he wouldn't come back from wherever he rode off to. Nights we thought maybe he'd decide the pain wasn't worth continuing. Pike turned his hat in his hands. But he kept going, kept the ranch running, kept us employed, kept moving forward, even though you could see it was killing him inside. Why are you telling me this? Because you brought him back. I've seen him laugh more in the past 6 months than in the past 10 years. He's got something to live for again, something beyond just existing. Pike looked at her. So yeah, it's hard when he's out there and you're here. But knowing you're here waiting, knowing he's got someone to come home to, that's what'll keep him safe. That's what'll bring him back. The storm broke on the 3rd day. Caleb and the crew rode in looking like ice sculptures, half dead from exhaustion and cold. Lydia had hot baths ready, hot food, hot coffee. She got Caleb upstairs, peeled off his frozen clothes, and put him in the tub. How bad? She asked. Lost about 30 head, could have been worse. Could have lost you too. He looked up at her, saw the fear in her eyes. I'm sorry. I know it was scary. It's not about being scared, it's about realizing how much I have to lose now. She knelt beside the tub. When I was alone, I had nothing. No one. If I died, it wouldn't matter. But now I have you and this life, and all of it could disappear in a storm, or an accident, or just bad luck. That terrifies me. Welcome to caring about people. It's awful and wonderful in equal measure. How do you stand it? By knowing that the alternative, not caring, not loving, is worse. I tried that for 10 years, Lydia. It's not living, it's just waiting to die. She helped him from the tub, dried him off, got him into bed. He was asleep before his head hit the pillow. She lay beside him, listening to him breathe, grateful for each breath. Spring came eventually, like it always did. The snow melted, the grass greened, and the ranch came back to life. Caleb had been right. They'd lost fewer cattle than expected. The winter had been survived. But Lydia noticed changes in herself. Her monthly bleeding had stopped. Her breasts were tender. She was tired all the time, bone-tired in a way that had nothing to do with work. She knew what it meant. She just wasn't ready to admit it. 2 weeks later, unable to ignore it any longer, she told Caleb. They were in the kitchen. She was making bread, kneading dough with mechanical precision. He was at the table with paperwork. "I'm pregnant." His head snapped up. "What?" "I'm pregnant. About 3 months, I think." He stood so fast his chair fell over. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor." He crossed to her, flower and all, and pulled her into his arms. She could feel him shaking. "A baby," he whispered. "We're having a baby." "Are you happy or terrified?" "Both. Definitely both." He pulled back to look at her face. "What about you?" "Also both." She set down the dough, wiping her hands. "I'm scared, Caleb. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't do this?" "Then we'll face it together. Whatever happens, we face it together." But the fear was there, constant and heavy. Lydia thought about Martha, about dying in childbirth, about the baby who never breathed. She thought about her own mother, who'd survived bearing her but been weakened by it, who died of fever a few years later. Caleb noticed her withdrawing, becoming quieter, more careful with herself. "Talk to me," he said one night. "About what?" "About whatever's going on in your head. You've been distant for weeks." She was quiet for a long time, then, "I'm afraid I'm going to die. Like Martha did." Caleb pulled her close. "You're not going to die." "You can't know that." "No, but I can make sure you have the best care possible. There's a doctor in Austin, trained in the East, specializes in difficult births. I'll hire him, bring him here when the time comes." "That'll cost a fortune." "I don't care. You're worth a fortune. You're worth everything." The pregnancy progressed. Lydia's belly grew. The baby moved, little flutters at first, then proper kicks that Caleb loved to feel under his hand. The crew was protective to the point of absurdity, refusing to let her lift anything heavy, hovering whenever she was outside. In August, Tom's wife Sarah came to stay. She'd had 4 babies of her own, knew what to expect, and her calm presence steadied Lydia's nerves. The 2 women spent long afternoons together, Sarah sharing stories about birth and motherhood, Lydia soaking up every bit of knowledge she could. The pain started on a Tuesday morning, early September. Lydia was in the garden when the first contraction hit. She stood up straight, hand on her belly, breathing through it. Sarah saw from the porch. "Was that what I think it was?" "I think so." "How far apart?" "That was the first one." "Then we've got time. Let's get you inside." The doctor arrived that afternoon, having been staying in town for the past 2 weeks on Caleb's coin. He examined Lydia, pronounced everything normal, and settled in to wait. The labor was long, longer than Lydia had expected, longer than Sarah had said was usual. The pains came in waves, each one worse than the last, until Lydia was biting down on leather to keep from screaming. Caleb stayed with her, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. The doctor had suggested he wait outside, that this wasn't a place for husbands. Caleb had told him in very clear terms that he wasn't leaving. 20 hours in, something changed. The doctor's expression shifted from calm to concerned. "What?" Caleb demanded. "What's wrong?" "The baby's turned. Breech position. I need to try to turn it, but it's going to hurt." "Do it," Lydia gasped. "Just do whatever you need to do." What followed was agony beyond anything Lydia had experienced. The doctor's hands inside her, trying to shift the baby while Sarah held her down and Caleb gripped her hand hard enough to bruise. Lydia did scream then, couldn't hold it back. "I've got it," the doctor said finally. "Head down. Now we push." An hour later, a baby's cry filled the room. "It's a girl," the doctor said, placing the bloody, squalling infant on Lydia's chest. A healthy girl. Lydia looked down at her daughter, at the tiny face, the shock of dark hair, the eyes squeezed shut against the bright world. She felt Caleb's hand on her shoulder, felt his tears dropping onto her arm. "We have a daughter," he said, his voice breaking. "Lydia, we have a daughter." The baby quieted at the sound of his voice, turning her head toward him. And in that moment, every fear Lydia had carried dissolved. This was what mattered, this tiny life they'd created together. They named her Anna, after Lydia's mother. Anna Ward, born September 14th, 1874, 6 pounds and fierce as a wildfire from the moment she drew breath. The ranch transformed with her arrival. The crew took turns holding her, these rough men turning gentle with an infant in their arms. Pike carved toys. Tom's wife made clothes. The whole community rallied around this new life. But it was Caleb who surprised Lydia most. He was utterly devoted to Anna, changing diapers without complaint, walking her when she cried at night, singing lullabies in his rough voice. Watching him with their daughter, Lydia felt something shift in her chest. This was healing. This was redemption. This was proof that the future didn't have to be defined by the past. Anna thrived. She grew from a tiny newborn into a sturdy baby, then a toddler who terrorized the chickens and followed her father everywhere. At 2 years old, she could already sit a horse with Caleb's help, already knew the names of all the cattle, already had the crew wrapped around her tiny finger. And she wasn't alone for long. A son came 2 years after Anna, Samuel, named for Caleb's father. Then another daughter, Rose. 3 children in 6 years, filling the house with noise and life and chaos. The ranch prospered. Caleb's careful management and the crew's hard work paid off. They expanded the herd, bought adjacent land, became one of the most successful operations in 3 counties. The house was expanded too, more bedrooms, a proper dining room, a study where Caleb kept his books. But it was never about the money or the land or the success. It was about the life they'd built, the family they'd created from nothing but stubborn hope and the willingness to try. One evening, when Anna was 8 and Samuel was 6 and Rose was 4, Lydia stood on the porch watching Caleb teach the children to rope fence posts. Anna was competitive, determined to do it better than her brother. Samuel was patient, focused. Rose was just happy to be included. Tom joined Lydia on the porch, both of them watching the scene. "You've done good here," he said. "We've done good. All of us." "True enough. But you especially. You took a broken man and a dying ranch and brought both back to life. I was just as broken. Maybe more. Maybe. But you both chose to heal together. That's the thing people don't understand about healing. It's not about fixing yourself alone. Sometimes you need someone else to hold the broken pieces while you figure out how they fit." Lydia thought about that. About the woman who'd walked up to the gate with nothing but a bag and a past she couldn't escape. About the man who'd been existing but not living, going through motions until they lost all meaning. About how they'd found each other at exactly the right moment, when both were ready to choose something different. "Do you think Martha would approve?" she asked quietly. "Of all this?" "I think Martha would be grateful someone finally made him smile again. She loved him, wanted him happy. This..." He gestured to the children, to Caleb laughing as Anna's rope went wide. "This is what she would have wanted for him." Years passed. The children grew. Anna became a fierce young woman who could ride and rope as well as any hand, who had her father's stubbornness and her mother's strength. Samuel was quieter, thoughtful, happiest with books and numbers. Rose was the heart of the family, the one who could make anyone laugh, who smoothed conflicts and brought people together. When Lydia was 45, she found herself pregnant again. It was unexpected. She'd thought those years were behind her. This pregnancy was harder than the others, her body older and less resilient. But a son was born in the spring, perfect and healthy. They named him Thomas, after Tom Ridley, who'd become family in all but blood. Tom himself was 60s by then, talking about retirement. But he stayed on, unable to imagine life away from the ranch. He'd never married, claimed he was married to the land. The crew had changed over the years. Pike had retired to live with his daughter in town. Billy Tucker had moved on to his own small ranch. But new men came, trained by Tom and Caleb, becoming part of the family the ranch had become. Caleb was 55 when young Thomas was born. Gray-haired now, lines deep around his eyes, but healthier than he'd been in his 40s. Having something to live for had added years to his life. One afternoon, when Thomas was 3 and running circles around the house, Caleb and Lydia took a rare moment alone. They walked up the hill to the oak tree where Martha and her son still rested. "I come here less often now," Caleb said. "Used to be every week. Now it's maybe once a month. Does that feel wrong?" "No, It feels like healing. He sat under the tree, pulling Lydia down beside him. I loved Martha. Still do in a way. But that life is gone. And what we've built, you and me, it's not a replacement. It's something new entirely. Do you think she knows, wherever she is? I think if there's anything after, she knows. And I think she's happy for us. He took Lydia's hand. We've had a good life, haven't we? The best. Even with all the hard parts, the fear, the struggle, the pain. Especially with those parts. They made us who we are. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the ranch spread below. 4 children playing in the yard. The crew working the cattle. The house that had been dead for 10 years before Lydia arrived, now bursting with life. I got a letter yesterday, Lydia said, from David Ward. William died. Fever took him about a month ago. She waited to feel something. Relief, sadness, anger. But there was only a distant acknowledgement. William Hale was a chapter that had closed long ago. How do you feel about it? Caleb asked. I don't, really. He was part of my past, but he hasn't been part of my present for 20 years. I hope he found peace before the end, but mostly I just don't feel anything. That's fair. Is it strange that I don't feel more? He was my husband once. He was your tormentor once. You don't owe him grief. Caleb squeezed her hand. You survived him, built a beautiful life despite what he did to you. That's the best revenge there is. Winter came again, as it always did. But they'd learned how to weather it. The house was warm, the stores were full, the cattle were hardy. This ranch knew how to survive. Caleb was 60 when his heart started failing. It happened gradually, small signs at first that he dismissed as age. Tiredness, shortness of breath, pains in his chest that came and went. By the time he finally admitted something was wrong, the doctor said there wasn't much to be done. How long? Caleb asked. Could be months, could be years, no way to know. He told Lydia that night. She was 50, still strong, still capable. The news hit her like a physical blow. No, not yet. We have more time. We have whatever time we get. That's all anyone gets. He pulled her close. I'm not afraid of dying, Lydia. I'm only afraid of leaving you. Then don't. Fight this. Stay with me. I will. As long as I can. He lasted 3 years. 3 years of declining health, of gradual weakening, of adjusting to limitations. But he fought. For Lydia, for the children, for the life they'd built together. Anna was 23, married to a rancher from the next county, pregnant with her first child. Samuel was 21, helping run the ranch with Tom. Rose was 19, engaged to a lawyer from Austin. Thomas was 6, too young to fully understand what was happening, but old enough to be scared. In the final weeks, Caleb spent most of his time in bed. Lydia barely left his side. The children came and went, the crew stopped by to pay respects, but mostly it was just the two of them. Tell me again, he said one afternoon, about the day you walked up to the gate. So Lydia told him, about seeing the smoke from his chimney, about deciding to gamble on kindness, about standing there with her worn bag while Tom Ridley told her they weren't hiring. Best decision I ever made, Caleb said, saying yes that day. Best decision I ever made was asking you to. Do you have regrets? About any of it? She thought about it honestly. I regret the years with William. I regret the pain, the fear. But if those years hadn't happened, I wouldn't have ended up here. I wouldn't have found you, so maybe I don't regret them after all. Maybe they were just the price I had to pay to find this. That's a high price. Worth it, though. Every moment with you has been worth it. He died on a Tuesday morning in March, with Lydia holding his hand and spring sun coming through the window. His last words were, "Thank you." The grief was enormous. Lydia felt like she'd been split open, everything inside her exposed and raw. But she didn't break. She'd learned over 25 years of marriage that grief was just love with nowhere to go, and she had plenty of places for that love. The children, the ranch, the life they'd built. They buried Caleb on the hill under the oak tree, next to Martha and the baby son he'd never known. Tom spoke at the service, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. Caleb Ward was the best man I ever knew. Fair, strong, loyal to his core. He built this ranch from nothing, survived losses that would have destroyed lesser men, and in the end, he found happiness again. That's not a tragedy. That's a triumph. After everyone left, Lydia sat alone under the tree between the two graves, Martha on one side, Caleb on the other. "Take care of him," she said to Martha's grave. "He's been mine for 25 years, but he was yours first. Take care of him until I get there." Life continued because it had to. Samuel took over running the ranch with Tom's guidance. Anna's first child was born, a daughter they named Lydia. Rose got married, moved to Austin. Thomas started school in town. Lydia kept the house running, kept the crew fed, kept the garden growing. She was 53, not young, but not old either. She had years ahead of her, maybe decades. She chose to fill them well. She taught Anna's daughter to cook, passing down recipes her own mother had taught her. She helped Samuel with the ranch books, her head for numbers as sharp as ever. She wrote letters to Rose in Austin, thick with news and advice and love. She read to Thomas every night, the same way Caleb used to read to the older children. And she lived. Not just existed, but truly lived. Because that's what Caleb would have wanted. That's what their whole life together had been about. Choosing to live despite pain, despite loss, despite fear. 10 years after Caleb died, Lydia was 63. Her hair was gray, her hands were stiff with arthritis, but she could still outwork most people half her age. The ranch had grown under Samuel's management. Anna had 3 children now. Rose had 2. Thomas was 16, tall and strong, already helping with the cattle. The family gathered for Christmas that year, all of them, children and grandchildren. Tom Ridley, now 75 and still refusing to retire. The crew both old and new. The house was chaos, noise and laughter and life. Standing in the kitchen watching them all, Lydia felt Caleb's presence so strongly it was like he was standing beside her. "We did good," she whispered. "Look at all this. Look at what we built." And somehow she knew he was looking, knew he was proud, knew he was waiting for her on that hill, under that tree, whenever her time came. But not yet. She still had work to do. Lydia lived to be 78 years old. She saw all her children married, saw 18 grandchildren born, even held 3 great-grandchildren before the end. The ranch thrived under Samuel's management, expanded to twice its original size. Anna's husband bought the neighboring property. Rose's son became a doctor. Thomas married a woman from town and had 4 children of his own. The family grew like the garden Lydia had planted that first summer, spreading roots, reaching for sun, thriving against odds. She died peacefully in her sleep on a spring morning, surrounded by family. They found her with a smile on her face, her hand resting on the photograph she kept on her nightstand. Her and Caleb on their wedding day, both of them looking at each other like the world outside that moment didn't exist. They buried her on the hill under the oak tree, between Caleb and Martha. 3 people who'd loved deeply, lost terribly, and somehow found their way back to hope. The headstone read simply, Lydia Ward, 1848 to 1926. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She chose courage, because that's what her life had been, in the end. A series of choices to be brave, to stop running, to trust again, to love again, to build instead of hiding, to live instead of just surviving. The ranch continued for generations. Great-great-grandchildren who never knew Lydia still heard stories about her, about the woman who arrived with nothing and built everything, about courage in the face of fear, about love as an act of defiance against a world that tried to break her. Her garden, tended by generations of hands, still grew on the same plot where she'd planted those first seeds. The house, expanded and modernized, still stood strong. And on the hill under the oak tree, 3 graves rested in the shade. 2 people who'd lost each other too soon, and one who'd arrived just in time to save a man from dying while still alive. Their story wasn't perfect. It was messy and hard and full of pain, but it was real. And in the end, maybe that's all any of us can hope for. Something real, something chosen, something built from the broken pieces we all carry. Caleb and Lydia Ward didn't have a fairy tale. They had something better. They had a life, lived fully, together, and then apart, but always connected by the choice they'd made on that first day. To say yes when it would have been easier to say no. To try when failure seemed certain. To love when love felt impossible. That was their legacy. Not the ranch, not the money, not the land, but the simple, stubborn, beautiful choice to keep going. To plant seeds and hope they grow. To build something from nothing. To survive the worst and still find reasons to smile. And maybe that's the lesson in all of this. That we're all walking up to some metaphorical gate with our worn bags and our painful pasts, hoping someone will take a chance on us. That we're all standing at windows in the dark, keeping watch over emptiness, waiting for something to fill it. The difference between surviving and living is so small sometimes. It's just the choice to stop running, the choice to stay, the choice to let someone see the broken parts and trust they won't use them as weapons. Caleb and Lydia made those choices. And in making them, they turned 2 ruined lives into something that lasted generations, something that mattered, something that proved even in the harshest places, even with the heaviest pasts, it's possible to find home. Not by being perfect, but by being brave enough to try.
You gotta be fucking kidding me, man!
That is shit.
This sucks.
That sucks.
What a fucking
Dude, are we
idiot.
serious?
I hate this fucking game, man.
Careful guys, there's 2
Last time that was hilarious.
there's 2 beehives, so we gotta go around. Don't get too close to them. Just hug the wall. M6.
I'm already hearing shit. Fuck is that?
You got that?
No, come back. No, no.
He's hearing the gas. He's literally just hearing the gas.
Complete dead end. Oh
Oh,
my god.
It's fire exit right.
can't believe I fucking died again at the beginning, man. I'm so bad at this fucking game.
I thought that turret was locking on me.
Not done here.
Alright, Zerty. What can we do with that thing?
There's hella landmines around here. Oh!
Ben's a brave man. That it's so fucking gassy in that place.
Dude, these fucking the steam everywhere is gonna piss me off.
Bump. Bump.
Alright, Zerty. I'll go first.
Where am I? Are
Ben.
we fucking serious?
That's fucking brutal.
Are we fucking serious? Did you see that shit?
Yeah, I did. I don't know if they'll make it out. The best thing they can do is